Welcome back to the channel. And since it's Monday, let's take a look at the week that was around the Ontario Hockey League with the Power Rankings for December 11th. And this is the second last Power Rankings before the Christmas break, and also the last Power Rankings before the World Juniors get underway. So a lot at stake over these next few weeks. And let's see where we stand right now. Starting off with team number 20, and that's the Niagara Ice Dogs. They fell two positions this week. They put up their first two-game winning streak the previous weekend, which was the first time they put in back-to-back wins in over a year. And how did they follow it up? Well, they went 0-3, and they also traded away their goaltender Marcus Vandenberg to the Sudbury Wolves, who was just named OHL Goaltender of the Week. But with them moving Vandenberg on, they've called up Charlie Burns, who's going to be the goalie of the future for Niagara. He was playing with the Fort Erie Meteors, where he was having some outstanding numbers in the GOJHL. I would expect him to make his OHL regular season debut this weekend because Niagara, they do have a 3-3 coming up against the Ottawa 67s, Kingston Frontenacs, and North Bay Battalion starting on Thursday. So I would probably lean to seeing Burns getting the start in the game against Kingston. That's just my hunch. Number 19, the Kingston Frontenacs. No change, same position as last week. They were on the road over the weekend through Northern Ontario, and it got off to a great start. They defeated the North Bay Battalion 4-3, and then they were up 3-1 midway through the game against the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, and it just fell apart for Kingston. They would then end up losing 7-5 to the Greyhounds in that game, and then lost 8-4 to the Sudbury Wolves, where they gave up 6 goals in the first period. The Kingston Frontenacs in rough shape going back home after that road trip. But, despite the struggles, Linus Hemstrom, he had a good week for Kingston. Goal, 3 assists in the win against North Bay, and then a goal against the Sudbury Wolves. For Kingston, they're in Peterborough Thursday, and then they're home to Niagara and Brantford before the Christmas break. Number 18, it's the Sarnia Sting. They are up 2 positions this week. They went 1-2, and it started off with a come-from-behind victory over the Barrie Colts. They put up 3 unanswered in the third period to take that win away from Barrie. And also Logan Phillips made his OHL debut in relief in that game, and he was also given credit for the win, so his first career OHL win. So there's just 2 games this week coming up for the Sarnia Sting. They're at home Friday against the Saginaw Spirit. That's going to be a big divisional game. And then they're in Flint on Saturday. So we'll see if the Sarnia Sting can turn this season around, as right now they're sitting outside of a playoff position in the Western Conference. Number 17, it's the Erie Otters. No change. Actually, they've been sitting 17th now for 3 straight weeks. They went 2-0, so they had a really good week. They outscored their opponents 8-2, but they've been a bit of a streaky team the llast few weeks. They're 5-4-1 over the last 10 games, so we're just waiting to see what the Erie Otters will do here. Kerry Torrance, though, continues to have a strong season for the Otters. 4 goals over his last 3 games. He's been something else. Erie, though, they do have 2 games at home this weekend, both of them pretty challenging matchups. They have to play the North Bay Battalion and then the Ottawa 67. So it's not going to be easy, but we'll see what Erie can do down at the Erie Insurance Arena. Number 16, it's the Barrie Colts. They fell 2 positions. Injuries and specialty teams continue to be a problem for the Barrie Colts. They went 1-2 last week, but they managed to snap that 4-game losing streak with a 4-3 win at home against the Mississauga Steelheads. But despite the team's struggles, Bo Jelsma continues to lead by example. He's got 2 goals, 2 assists in the 3 games last week. He is just a machine, and really the reason why the Barrie Colts ended up winning that game in overtime against Mississauga, knocking down the puck at center ice, creating a 2-on-1 for Ronak Jodwan and Kayshawn Aitchison, and that would be the dagger in that hockey game for Barrie. It is another tough week, though, for the Colts. Friday night, they make their first ever trip to Brantford to play the Bulldogs, and then they're at home to take on the first-place Kitchener Rangers on Saturday, and that's at the Saddlein Arena. Puck drop at 7:30. Coming in at number 15, we have the Oshawa Generals. They're up 1 position. The Generals, they made good on their 3-game road trip last week, going 2-0-1. Their overtime loss was against the Ottawa 67s, who have been on a roll, so it's hard to slow down Ottawa right now. But for Oshawa, they moved ahead of Barrie for that final playoff spot right now in the Eastern Conference, so things looking up for the Generals. Maybe now that they're getting a little healthier, they're starting to find their chemistry. Noah Bender also earning his first career OHL win against the Sarnia Sting, while Connor Lockhart earning a hat trick in the win against the Windsor Spitfire. So things looking up, I think, right now for Oshawa. This weekend, the Generals, they play a home against Mississauga before hosting the Peterborough Petes on Sunday. Number 14, it's the Windsor Spitfires, who are up another position. Just don't let the standings fool you. I know Windsor right now, they are last in the Western Conference, but they went 2-1 last week. This Spitfires team looking a lot different under interim head coach Torres. They have 5 wins in their last 8 games since Jared Smith was let go behind the bench. And Oliver Peer, he had a huge game in the win against Flint. 3 goals, 2 assists, good for 5 points in one game. I love the play of Oliver Peer. Windsor, they do have a lot of ground to make up in the West. They're 10 points out of a playoff spot. They're trying to catch up to the Flint Firebirds. So if they can continue to string these wins, who knows? Maybe they could be challenging for a playoff spot later in the second half. But for Windsor, it's one step at a time. I think this team kind of looking to the future, but if you can get that playoff experience and get a good run, basically at this point, every game is going to be like a playoff game for the Windsor Spitfires from here on out. They do host London on Thursday and then travel to Owen Sound on Saturday. Coming in at number 13, we have the Mississauga Steelheads, who fell 4 positions. It was a rough 3-3 for Mississauga. They went 1-1-1, starting off with a loss at home to the North Bay Battalion. They gave up a 2-goal lead in an overtime loss to the Barrie Colts on Saturday, but ended with a win at home against Niagara, a team that you should beat right now with the way things are going in the Ontario Hockey League. The Steelheads, they are a young team. They're also the most penalized team in the Ontario Hockey League, but their penalty kill unit getting the job done. They only gave up 1 power play goal against when they were shorthanded 14 times during those 3 games last weekend. So Mississauga, yes, they fell in the power rankings. I think they'll bounce back. This is a really good hockey team with Angus McDonnell, Porter Martone, Luke Misa, and then your goaltending too with Leanders and Ivan Kovic. This is a really good Mississauga team. Expect them to turn it around, maybe add a piece or two before the OHL trade deadline. But they've been kind of average these last few weeks, and I would think Mississauga will find that next year. They do play a home against the Generals, who've been playing better, and then wrap it up against the Ottawa 67s, who are right now first in the East Division. Coming in at number 12, the Peterborough Petes. They are down 1 position. They went 1-2 in what was a pretty important week for them for battling for top spot in the East Division. They lost to the Brantford Bulldogs and then split a home with the Ottawa 67s. Owen Beck, he had 5 points in the first 2 games before heading off to join Team Canada at the development camp. And that's going to be a huge loss for the forward group for Peterborough with Beck no longer at the lineup. So they do have a home coming up against, or they're back at home against Kingston and on the road to face Guelph and Oshawa this weekend. So I think right now the depth, it's going to be tested with Peterborough. There's a lot of questions about what this team's going to do leading up to the OHL trade deadline. And maybe before that Christmas break, we start to get a few more answers in regards to what this team is planning to do when it comes to the Eastern Conference race. Number 11, we have the Owen Sound Attack. They are up 1 position. They went 2-0 last week, including a overtime victory over the Guelph Storm. Servek Petrovsky, he was the hero in that hockey game. With Colby Barlow still injured due to a back injury, Petrovsky, he has been counted upon offensively. He's riding a 4-game point streak right now and getting the job done. Coming up for Owen Sound, they do play at home against the Storm Wednesday, so the Highway 6 rivalry resumes before going to London Friday, and then back at the Bayshore for a game against the Windsor Spitfires. At number 10, we have the Brantford Bulldogs. They climbed 3 positions this week. It's been a steady climb for Brantford. They had a great week. They went 2-0-1, and they're now 2 points behind Ottawa for first place in the East Division. And they opened the week with a win in Peterborough before forcing the Kitchener Rangers to overtime in a home series. And that overtime game included a winner from Nick Lardis on Sunday, where the Bulldogs came back. Kitchener, they had a good, comfortable lead, but the Bulldogs turning it around. Nick Lardis also getting a hat trick. And that's why I said last week, this Bulldogs team, they're going to go as far as Nick Lardis is going to carry them. Lardis right now 3rd in goals with 23 on the season, 35 points so far. So I think for Brantford, this is a team that could be a bit of a dark horse in the Eastern Conference. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe add a piece or two just to give some more depth leading up to the OHL trade deadline. The Bulldogs, they play 2 games this week. They're hosting Barrie Friday night before traveling to Kingston Sunday afternoon. Coming in at number 9, we have the Flint Firebirds. They're up one position, but they had a pretty rough week. They went 0-2, and they only moved up in the power rankings because the Steelheads and the Petes both fell in the power rankings. For Flint, they were outscored 13-4 in games against Saginaw and Windsor. The Firebirds just not looking too Flint-like. Braden Kressler, though, he was the only player who managed to get points in both games last week, extending his point streak to 4 games. And I would not be surprised to see Flint drop like a rock in the power rankings if they continue to play like they are. They have to play Saginaw Wednesday night before hosting Sudbury and then Sarnia before the Christmas break. So Flint needing to turn things around here as they were looking not too bad, but kind of hitting a bump in the road. For number 8, though, we have the Guelph Storm. They also fell one position. If it wasn't for Flint having a bad week, the Storm, they could have fallen a little more in the power rankings. They went 0-2-1 last week. It was an off week for Guelph because you kind of expect more from this hockey team. They head to Owen Sound Wednesday night for a rivalry matchup. Then they host the Peterborough Petes and the Sioux Greyhounds. And that Sault Ste. Marie game, that's going to be a challenge as the Greyhounds firing on all cylinders right now. Coming in number 7, we have the Sudbury Wolves, who moved up one position, and I'm wondering if we're starting to see the real Sudbury Wolves. They were 2-0-1 last week, put up 8 goals in their wins over Niagara and Kingston. They made 2 trades also last week, picking up Marcus Vandenberg from the Ice Dogs, and he won in his debut yesterday against Kingston, while Lucas Signorati, who was picked up from Erie, he scored in his second game as a member of the Sudbury Wolves. So those trades paying off early on. Things, though, they're looking up. So we'll see what the Sudbury Wolves team can do. They are traveling this weekend on the road through the Western Conference. Stops in Flint, Saginaw, and London. So those games in Saginaw and London, those are going to be huge for the Sudbury Wolves, and we'll see which team shows up. Coming in at number 6 is the London Knights. No change from last week. The Knights 2-1, which included a big 7-3 victory over the Saginaw Spirit. And then they lost 5-4 in Sault Ste. Marie. I know they were missing some key pieces, including Denver Barkey, Easton Cowan, and Oliver Bonk, who are now at camp with Team Canada for the upcoming World Juniors. But the depth of this London Knights team, it's going to be tested. Sam Dickinson, he had a really good game in Sault Ste. Marie. He had a goal and 2 assists in that hockey game. So Dickinson will be counted upon a little bit more over these next few weeks. London, they play in Windsor on Wednesday for hosting Owen Sound and Sudbury. Coming in at number 5, we have the Sioux Greyhounds. No change from last week. The top teams right now in the Ontario Hockey League, it's so close right now. The Greyhounds, they were 3-0 last week, including a 3-2 win in overtime against Sudbury. Andrew Gibson, he scored the game winner in that game. For Sault Ste. Marie, the Knights, they might not have had a full lineup, but it was still a solid victory on home ice at the GFL Memorial Center. And those are big points in the long run. If Sault Ste. Marie is going to want to take top spot in the Western Conference, you take all the points you can get. And especially when you get it in regulation like that against a team like London, that's going to go a long way in the overall standings come playoff time. So the Sioux, they do wrap up on the road this weekend before the Christmas break. They have stops in North Bay, Kitchener, and Guelph. And the game in Kitchener, that one's going to be huge. That's a Friday night game at the Odd. That one's going to be a lot of fun. Coming in at number 4, we have the North Bay Battalion, who fell one position. They only played 2 games last week, and they went 1-1. And that win against the Mississauga Steelheads meant they were tied with the Steelheads for first in the Central up until Mississauga got that loser point against Barrie in overtime. So North Bay still challenging for top spot in the Central. Dalen Wakely, a good week for him. 4 points, including a hat trick against Mississauga. North Bay, they host Sault Ste. Marie on Wednesday night before traveling to Erie and Niagara. Number 3, it's the Ottawa 67s. They moved up one spot. Ottawa, they're now top in the East Division after going 2-1 last week. They actually have a share for first place overall in the Eastern Conference with Mississauga. And I know I've talked a lot about Luca Pinelli with his goal scoring, but take a look at the Ottawa 67s goaltenders right now. Max Donoso and Colin McKenzie, both in the top 5 overall for goals against average, while McKenzie also tied for second in save percentage, and that's at a .913, tied with Ryerson Leanders. So the goaltending also sensational right now for Ottawa. If they can keep this up, I know they're going to have some decisions to make because you got the 1A, 1B system. Do they move one of their goaltenders ahead of the trade deadline? Is there really a market for goaltenders? We saw what Vandenberg went for from Niagara, but still, they're in a good position right now, the Ottawa 67s. They're just 2 points ahead of Brantford, though, for first in the division, and they're on the road for 3 games this week. They're in Niagara, Erie, and Mississauga. Coming in at number 2, we have the Kitchener Rangers. No change from last week. Ranger fans may have been a little nervous last week with how close those games were, being all 1-goal differences. But in the end, they went 2-0-1 and remained 6 points ahead of the Greyhounds for top spot in the league. And they're also first by a long shot in goals for with 158, 26 better than Sault Ste. Marie, who has the second most goals for. The Rangers' depth, it's going to be tested with the World Juniors on the horizon. And this weekend, they're taking on Sault Ste. Marie Friday night, which is a huge tilt for the Western Conference. And then they travel to Barrie on Saturday, which could be a bit of a trap game for Kitchener, as the Colts, of course, now sitting outside of the playoff picture in the Eastern Conference. If you look too far past them, the other thing is with the Christmas break, teams, they got to try to avoid thinking about getting together a family and getting away for a little bit. And you can see that sometimes in games, especially like this, where a team is at the tops of their game right now, playing a lower ranked team. It could be a bit of a trap. So we'll see what happens with Kitchener on Saturday. And number 1 in the power rankings for the second week in a row, it is the Saginaw Spirit. 1-1 last week, but they have 8 wins in their last 10 games. And the top teams, they're just getting it done right now. And that includes the Saginaw Spirit. Zane Parekh, he had a goal and 3 assists in the win against Flint, and he has 8 points in 8 of his last 9 games. So Zane Parekh, the NHL draft prospect for this summer, getting it done with the Spirit. Saginaw, they look legit right now. They play a 3-3 this weekend, starting at home against Flint on Thursday. Then they travel to Sarnia before hosting the Sudbury Wolves. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, could this be a preview of the OHL Championship? I know it's a long ways away from the playoffs for the Ontario Hockey League, but it's that what if. Saginaw being the Memorial Cup hosts, a heavy favorite from the West, and then the Sudbury Wolves, who were picked to be the preseason favorite coming out of the Eastern Conference. Could these two teams meet in the OHL final? It's way too early to assume that, but still, it's got to be in the back of the minds of Saginaw and Sudbury fans. So that's how things are shaping up right now in the Ontario Hockey League the week that was. Let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the week and the power rankings. Who are your surprises of late from the Ontario Hockey League, and what are you looking forward to most this weekend, as it's the final weekend before the Christmas holidays? So again, thanks for tuning in, and remember to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.